guys, welcome back to the Student Switchboard. This week is a Presentation 101. Presentations are something that are par for the course now, not only in terms of university and college courses, but also at high school level and also in job interviews when you're out in the big bad world. For some people, this is second nature. They're extremely comfortable in front of a classroom, they don't mind standing up and talking in front of a group of people, and it doesn't really faze them in the slightest. For a lot of people though, the prospect of giving a presentation to a group full of people is actually really daunting and can go from making you feel a little bit nervous when you're going into the room to actually being really ill with worry. So I thought that I would talk to you about that today and just give a few tips for making presentations a little bit easier. Tip number one, this is more of a practical one, but it's one that can actually make you feel a little bit better if you take it on board. If you are allowed to have a computer presentation in the background, if it isn't just a case of standing up and just reading out, most presentations expect you to have a kind of computerised background and backdrop with some key points highlighted on it. So if you are able to do that, make a really good job of your actual presentation. Don't do a rush job of just at the last minute cobbling together a couple of blank slides with a few bullet points on it. Take your time to actually make a really nice presentation. There are other options than just using PowerPoint. You can use something like Prezi, which I will link below. That's a website that you can go on to make your own presentations. Prezi has a lot of really cool features. You can zoom in and out of different things. It gives you the options to upload some really interesting backgrounds, and it can make for a really cool visual presentation. I would, in that instance, like to thank my friend Kevin for that, because that wasn't actually something that I knew about until I did my Masters and Kevin told me about it, so thanks Kevin. Sorry for giving away your tips. However, if you are only using PowerPoint, there are lots of really cool ways to make a really nice visual presentation. In terms of this, I have done a blog post, so you can go and check that out. I'll leave a link to it in the description box below, but it's just a kind of visual guide on making quite a nice presentation. If it's something that you haven't really spent a lot of time on before, this might be quite useful to help you find some different features that are available in PowerPoint that you maybe didn't know about. Anyway, the point of doing this is that if you have a really nice, well put together, well structured visual presentation in the background, it's going to make you feel a little bit more confident. Tutors are not going to appreciate it if you put just the entire text speech of what you're going to say in your presentation on the backdrop. So make sure that you're only using bullet points and little maybe phrases and keywords that are going to help remind you of what it is that you're talking about and highlight to the class and to the tutor what it is that you're talking about. But having that there as a sort of security blanket, it means that you know that you can always refer to that. If you maybe get a bit nervous and you forget about what you're talking about, you can always look back to that and you know that it's going to guide you back to where you were. Point number two. This is an obvious one, but practice really does make perfect. If you get anxious talking in front of people, the worst thing that you can possibly do is not have gone through it in advance. So first, I would advise just going through it on your own. Don't just sit and read it quietly in the library. Stand in your bedroom or go and find an empty classroom somewhere. I used to do this. I would go and find an empty classroom. Once you've done that, you can move on to point three, which is rehearse it in front of a friend. Practicing in front of a friend or a couple of friends gives you that feeling of I have an audience. It definitely makes it become a bit more real. It's more of an authentic experience because you get to practice things like eye contact, which is important. It's very tempting to avoid eye contact at all costs when you're nervous because you don't want to meet someone's gaze in case it distracts you. But if you don't make any eye contact, if you're not engaging with the tutor, if you're not engaging with the people in your class, then it's going to be really obvious that you're nervous and it might even come across as that you're disinterested. So make sure that you're practicing making eye contact if it's with a couple of your pals in an empty classroom or in your room at night, whatever it is. Just make sure that you've practiced with an audience. It gets you used to that sort of fear of, I have people watching me, and it just makes it that bit more easy when you go in to do the actual presentation and all eyes are on you. Tip number four, if you are allowed to have note cards with you, have note cards with you. It can be something like a security blanket, just like having the well-structured presentation in the background. If you've got some note cards just with bullet points, do not script what you're writing. I have done that before and then it becomes distracting because you lose your flow of where you are and you want to look back down and just make sure that you haven't forgotten a sentence. Just key points, key bullet points. You don't have to learn this absolutely by heart. As long as you're covering all of the important points, it doesn't matter if you say it slightly differently to how you had prepared it in advance. But if you've got note cards with some bullet points on it, just for reference, it can make you feel more comfortable. But also if you have something to hold, it can make you fidget less. I think sometimes if you don't have something to kind of hold on to and you're feeling a bit shaky and you're feeling a bit nervous, it gives you the temptation to maybe start touching your hair or fiddle with your jacket or your top. Things like that make you look more nervous and show the class that you're maybe uncomfortable, whereas if you have some note cards to hold and you can hold on to them, it makes you fidget a bit less. So if you are allowed to have note cards, which in some instances you're not, so do make sure that you clear that with your tutor first, make sure you know what the protocol is. Don't go in there thinking you're allowed to have them and then discover you're not. In advance, check with your tutor that you're allowed to have note cards, and if you are, have them. And tip number 5, if you're really nervous, plan something nice for afterwards. If you can afford to take a little bit of time out and just go for a wander around the shops, or go out for a drink with a friend, or even just something as simple as like treat yourself to a cake. It sounds ridiculous, but just treat yourself to something, or make a plan to do something with some friends once it's over, and it gives you something nice to look forward to after it. So those are my top tips for giving a presentation at uni or at college or even at school, whenever you've got to give a presentation. I hope that those were helpful. These tips could apply to giving a solo presentation or actually giving a group presentation. The same tips would apply. Obviously, if you're giving a group presentation, just make sure that at times that you're not speaking, you are not looking around the room, fidgeting. Make sure that you're making eye contact with the audience, you're making eye contact with your tutor. Just make sure that you look engaged. Make sure you look as if you're listening to what your friend's saying, maybe nod. Don't stand and look around. Definitely don't have your phone in your pocket, and check it. I've been in group situations before where people have checked their phone during the presentation, and being me, being a bit of a perfectionist, I couldn't even begin to cope with that. So don't have things like phones in your pocket that you can be tempted to look at. Make sure that you're listening and make sure that you're engaged with what's going on, and otherwise the same tips apply. So thanks so much for watching, guys. I really hope that you enjoyed this and that this was helpful. If you have a presentation coming up and you're feeling a bit anxious about it, let me know in the comments below and we can have a chat. And as I say, I have got a presentation tips for PowerPoint over on my blog, so the link to that is in the description box below. I hope that you all have a lovely week, and I will see you again next Monday. Thanks for watching. Bye. You might be somebody who likes to get the work done really far in advance. You like to be completely organised weeks before the project's actually due, and you like to have that all worked out, and the other people in your group or a couple of other